webinar. This is hosted by the Learning Institute at Millersville University. So at the Learning Institute, we host different events with the goal to educate students and community members and educators about how to foster human rights and cultivate social justice. So today we'll be talking about doing so in higher education, but our webinar series, like the event we're hosting today, is one of many events that we host throughout the year. We also have a documentary and dialogue series, and in April, we are hosting our 8th annual conference. So I will follow up with information about the Learning Institute, but we are just happy to provide this webinar with them. So some logistics for today's event, we have a Zoom webinar set up and we want you to participate, but with the way that it's set up, you will not be able to put your cameras on or have your mics turned on, but you can participate by typing in your questions to the Q&A. You can type in questions at any time, but there'll be a time at the end that'll be designated specifically for addressing questions. So yeah, as we get started on today's event, talking about higher education, we will be exploring the disparities and barriers within higher education, especially as it relates to minority groups. And here to lead us in that discussion is Bernardo Hall, who is Associate Vice President for Student Affairs and Enrollment Management at Millersville University. So I will hand over the mic to Bernardo. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a great day at Millersville University and a great day in Lancaster. And so we wanted to talk today, and I will get right into the building right behind me is the building that I work in here at Millersville University, which is the SMAC. And I have been here now for 3 years, coming here in 2018. And I am glad to be a part of this panel, as well as a part of the great community at Millersville University. Today, we're going to be talking about access to higher education, and we have a distinguished and renowned panel that we will take some time to introduce to you. And the first person will be Abby Gabner, and she is employee, alumni, and graduate student at Millersville University. And she currently serves as the executive associate to the vice president of student affairs and enrollment management. She earned her bachelor's degree in psychology and is currently working towards a master's degree in social work. And prior to that, she worked in both state and county government, most recently for Governor Wolf's administration. We have Dr. Tiffany Wright is an associate professor for educational foundations at Millersville University. She is also the co-director of the EDD program in educational leadership and the coordinator of the MED program for leadership for teaching and learning. Tiffany's research interests include lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender issues in education, climate for LGBT Q plus, educators, teacher effectiveness, culturally relevant pedagogy, principal preparation, program evaluation, and principals best practices in evaluating teacher effectiveness. We also have Melissa Atrosky. Melissa graduated from Millersville University and taught social studies at J.P. McCaskey High School for 10 years. She earned her master's in school counseling and principal certificate and has been a counselor at PMSHS for 19 years. Congratulations. Currently, she is the K through 12 counseling department coordinator, and specific areas of interest are post-secondary planning, preparation, and ensuring equitable access to information and support for students. We also have Christina Williams, is currently employed as the Associate Director of Student Access and Support Services at Millersville University. She is very passionate about the issues surrounding student access and success in urban high schools and in higher education. She has extensive experience working and supporting underrepresented, first generation, and marginalized students and families At Millersville University, she has directed and assisted in programs as the Pre-Scholars Institute, our Summer Bridge program, the Lancaster Partnership Program, and the No Gap Committee. She earned a bachelor's degree in sociology at Millersville and received her master's degree in educational leadership from Temple University. And she is currently working on her doctorate at Westchester University. Christina is a first generational Latina student who benefited from Access Scholarship and Bridge programs that have opened the doors to make her dreams and her family's dreams possible. All right. So we have quite a few great individuals here that will be able to answer the questions that we have prepared, but also maybe some of the questions that you put or place in the chat. So if you have some questions or you would like to place them in the chat or the question and answer, please feel free to do so. We await those questions, and inquisitive minds want to know, inquiring minds want to know. So we look forward to hearing from you through the chat or through the questions and answers. So our first question that we have is, what is the importance of higher education post-COVID? Will face-to-face meetings have the same value? Who would like to start us off?
I'll go ahead and start.
All right, Tiffany, please.
So, as a faculty member who works at Millersville University and someone who works closely with some of our local school districts, one thing I know that been a real challenge during COVID, especially for our older high school students, is this sense of isolation that they've felt and the inability to really have their social emotional needs met. And I think more than ever, institutions of higher education are poised to have the opportunity to help those new college students to work on some of those things and access some services through our institutions. I think we're at a prime opportunity to really help the mental health of our young folks who are just coming of age and who've had an incredible year like we all have.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'd, I'd love to go off of that,
Mhm.
Tiffany. I think that essentially the needs still remain for us to mentor students, for us to provide them the guidance and encouragement, but there are now some gaps. We effectively have two classes of students who didn't have our normal programming or what we would have offered to the general public in terms of preparing them for this transition to college. We haven't been able to have representatives into the building to talk face to face. We haven't had students walk around to college fairs and actually meet with admissions officers and get that firsthand connection that so often is what it makes you feel like you're actually connected to a university from the get-go. And so we really we need to plan moving forward, but we have this group of students that we almost need to, in my mind, treat them all like college freshmen, even though they may currently be freshmen at college or they may be starting their sophomore year. These students are going to be experiencing this all, and they didn't have the prep. So I think that changes up the kinds of services and supports that we'd want to have for them right at the start.
Thank you, Melissa. And follow up on that one, are the faculty or the staff able to structure courses and environments to support and meet the needs of a diverse student population, whether it's at the high school or whether it is at higher ed, as far as the university? Abby, please.
I think
You're
if
on mute. Go
faculty,
ahead.
I think if faculty need to be considerate of the fact that some of these students that we're talking about today may not have the technology or the access or not, at least not reliable sources of it. I mean, I know I've worked with some students, some undergrad students that they might have a laptop, but it only works half the time, or they can't, they try to get in touch with IT, but in this environment, IT is just crazy busy, and so there's waiting lines and lists. So I think faculty being considerate of that and working with students and allowing them to maybe turn in something later because they were having trouble accessing a test or something like that.
Thank you.
Can I say
Christina?
something, Bernardo? I was going to say, the virtual platform that we've sort of been forcefully immersed in has really, highlighted a lot of the issues that students have been having at the forefront. And so some of the innovative things that faculty or teachers can do to support students is, sort of involve diverse texts in their courses to have meaningful conversations about the issues surrounding what students are facing because of the COVID pandemic. For us in higher education, in our office, working with first generation, low income urban students, some of the issues that have been happening for quite some time is the issue of having money immediately when they enter their course in order to buy their books. And so we have really been having meaningful conversations with faculty to start off their courses and putting in their syllabus opportunities for students to start out with digital text. So starting out the readings with digital text so that it gives students some time to purchase the books they need to be successful in their courses. So small implementations like that really make a huge difference in a student's success on our campus. I think one of the things that COVID had done, and then I'll wrap up, I'm sorry, that has really highlighted is that for higher education, we have a huge hand in a student's success, because if you have a low income student at a public institution, a public K through 12 school, their issues do not become non-existent when they enter higher education. If they're low income and don't have money for certain things when they're in high school, they're not going to have most likely those things when they enter higher education. And so we're receiving those students on our campuses, and so we need to make sure that we have the services to provide them the opportunity to be successful.
Thank you. Tiffany, were you getting ready to say something?
I was. How could you guess? Thank you. I want to follow up from what Christina said and take that a step further. I know at Millersville there's a push for the use of open source textbooks, so that even more so than allowing the students to use an electronic version of it, we as faculty were some of our faculty members were given a small grant to go out and research open source textbooks for their content area and for their courses, in order to provide this opportunity for our students to have that access that oftentimes doesn't happen if you're requiring students to purchase a $70 textbook or a $100 textbook. And so I know that's one thing that our institution has done really well. And one other thing that, I think I've always done this in my courses, but I think more so than ever, it's important to allow students to attempt the assignments until mastery. So if that means they have to do it 4 different times, allow that to happen and extend the semester if need be for that student to master the course so that they can progress in a way that makes sense to them. Like I said, I've always allowed that, especially in like a research methods course where it's complicated for some students to learn, especially if they are not native English speakers. But even more so now, the grace that we can offer, I think, is just so vital for all of our students and each other.
That's very good. And the piece that I wanted to reiterate to folks is that, yes, today, as we are participating with the Learning Institute, some of the suggestions that have been made by our panelists are good for all students. And as far as for them to be connected and engaged in their educational process. One of the things that the Learning Institute asked us to address, and that's why this group has been brought together, is to look at the disparities, racial as well as ethnic disparities within higher education, as well as barriers that some groups face in order to attend college. So I'm going to ask our esteemed panelists, how has the persistence of students of color been supported within your high school and or college?
So
Melissa, please, go ahead.
I can talk a bit about some of the efforts that we're making to support students of color, in particular at Penn Manor High School, which is right adjacent to the university. Um, we have um, we have tried to adapt things that we've typically done in face-to-face person to a virtual format. And some of them have fallen flat, some of them have actually proven to be really effective and personal. Um, in terms of the persistence from students starting in ninth grade and graduating, I don't have all those numbers with me, but I can tell you that currently we have about 48% of our students going on to a four-year school. That's what they're indicating when they walk out of our doors. And then we have 22% going on to a two-year program. We usually have about 2% go, 2 or 3% go into a military offering of some type. And then we have a pretty large agricultural community, and we have a pretty significant number of our students go immediately into the family agricultural business. So we're hovering right about 48 and 22% in terms of who's going to college or going to a two-year school after high school.
All right, thank you. Just so that our panelists are aware, two of our attendees have shared some thoughts. They wanted all of us to be aware of that, remembering that even though students may have the technology, they may not have the private space in which to use it. And definitely, you know, physical location or isolation from other family members and or responsibilities that they may have at home that they may not be able to utilize the technology that they have at their disposal and have to go maybe to a public library in order to use technology there or to find a space on campus, especially with COVID, since a lot of our facilities are closed or that the facilities I'm talking about in the surrounding community may not have the same hours of access. A question that has come up: does Millersville University have policies to support ESL students with extra testing times, dictionary support?
We do have a learning services office that I know helps. I don't have a lot of specific information on this, but I also know that there's some technology out there that can read out loud text. So I don't know, maybe Tiffany knows more.
Very good, Abby. Yeah.
I wish I did. No, that's a really important question that we can research and get back to folks about. That's a really important question that I would like to know the answer to also.
I do know that there's an active migrant education program on campus that supports students that would fall into that category. And there are significant supports for those students in terms of assisting with transportation and different barriers. I know that doesn't answer your question exactly, Lori, but I would say that's one element that's covered. And Nikki, I just wanted to kind of reiterate your comment about not have, just because they have the technology and not necessarily having the physical location. I think that goes back to Renata's first or second question. It's, you know, some people see us as hand-holding students. They might call it coddling students. In my world, I call that helping out the colleague next door, or maybe taking into consideration specific needs of a student. I know when I have a health issue or something going on, I go talk to my boss and we may come up with a plan for that. And so I kind of feel like sometimes we have this need to make students, we need to teach them how it is in the real world. And sometimes we forget, you know what, we get a lot of help too ourselves, and we get a lot of support from our colleagues. And so modeling that is just as important. Some people do think that's a little too soft, and I think that there's a fine line and a boundary and some barriers there that you walk a fine line. But I would just like to offer that up in terms of the kinds of things that we can do in addition to some of the really good ideas that the other panelists provided.
Very good. Just for everyone, we have, you know, just on our campus, 7,800 students or more that are attending, and each of them come to us at different levels. So we cannot have one shot good for all. We have to assess the students of where they are in order to help bring them to a level where they are able to be competitive. So that is an important aspect that all of us would need to look at as far as where students are, where they are as far as in their level of development, and how far we have to reach in order to reach them to bring them to the level, since they are all at very different levels. So very good, Melissa, in the response. If you have other questions, attendees or our colleagues are ready to answer. How has, in looking at, and I'm going to ask here to follow up with Melissa's first answer, and when we were asking about what are some of the things that you've done for high schools or college as far as to help students of color being supported within your high school or college. We answered it in one aspect. She spoke to our school right next door to us here in the borough, in Millersville Borough. What about at college? What are some things that can be done?
I can I can answer that if I'll take a
And
stab.
Abby, yes, after you, Christina, Abby.
So the office that I work for, the Office of Student Access and Support Services, I feel like is a unique office and on a college campus because for a sense we have one foot in the K through 12 environment and then one foot in the higher education environment. And that's because of the programs we actually facilitate, support a lot of the K through 12 initiatives to create a college going culture and to encourage students to attend the four-year institution or community college or trade school. So, programs like the Lancaster Partnership Program, Gear Up, all types of those pre-collegiate programs really support the idea of putting us in place at the high school, even middle schools, and even sometimes the elementary schools to definitely expose students, their families, to this idea of college, to the idea of advancing their education beyond, the high school diploma. And so, the beauty of our office is that we develop these relationships with the community, with students and their families, and then we're able to continue that relationship and support students as they're looking at post-secondary options and they're talking about financial aid and what are the options when it comes to that. And so, you know, our office initially, we support students from very early until, if for most of our students, for when they decide to attend Millersville University. And I think that's the way it should be. It should be more like a village and a partnership when it comes to supporting students and their families in pursuit of advancing their education.
Thank you so much, Christina. Abby, you had, and one of the things that folks, Abby has a passion as dealing with equitable access to education and definitely looking at eliminating barriers and admission practices for first generation and historically marginalized students. So, Abby, you were going to tackle that question as well. So, what do you have to share with our attendees?
Well, I'm glad Christina jumped in first because SAS is just incredible. SAS is the office she works for, which stands for Student Access and Support Services. They've inspired me because I want to do my field work with them. So we're still working that out now. But I just wanted to add that, and SAS supports students not only academically, but socially. They do things called create courageous conversations where they bring up tough topics and, they all talk about it. I know that they've met with some area policemen come in and kind of dealt with some of the race issues there that's currently going on in the world. And we have student success coaches to help with students academically. And the DEI training that's coming for students. PASHI is now like looking toward through, I forget what the EverFi, it's called EverFi. And so students are going to be taking DEI training, which hopefully will help on the campus climate and with persistence.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Um, Thinking and following up with that, what community resources are in place to support students and their families in receiving a college degree or a college education that you are aware of?
So I think Lancaster County is definitely a great example of where the community has really come together in providing different programs for students and families and to support them. And so, we have not only the university, neighboring universities helping to support the community, but there's community programs like SACA that supports the Latinx community, the Mix. There's a lot of community organizations within Lancaster County that really serve Lancaster residents and their families in pursuit of not only education, but also in other areas, because we always think of academics, right, as being the only thing that our students and families are struggling with. And really, it could be residential things, it can be interpersonal social things. And so Lancaster County does have a community that really supports its residents and has a lot of community organizations that are there to support them in all of the needs, not just one. And so I just named a few, but there are a ton of organizations that support students and families.
Thank you, Christina. Anyone, any of our other panelists would like to share at this point?
I feel like
Melissa?
I have to mention the hub. I mean, that's a local resource to our Millersville students, but they keep our students fed and they provide, other programming. And so I just didn't want to leave them out. We've also been working on something called the Share Meals app. I'm hoping that takes off a little more. I don't know that there's been a lot of use, or I don't know if students really know about it, but I think that there's some potential there to help with some of our food insecure students.
Can you or Tiffany elaborate a little bit more? Because Melissa was getting ready to jump in and it looked like you spoke and said the hub, and they all nodded. So it looked like that was the next one on their lips as well. Could you elaborate a little bit more on the food app that you're speaking to?
There's an app that students can download onto their phone. A student from, I think, NYU developed it, and it can, so I work in an office on campus. If we have an event and we have leftover food that we know isn't going to get eaten, we can literally put it on the app and tell students we have food here. We can tell them what kind of food it is and where it's located and how long it's going to be there. And then they can just show up if they have the app. But I think part of the problem with it is that they don't know about it and people aren't using it. So
I know that the IT and the social work department, as well as computer science, worked on something. Is anyone on our panel familiar with what was done with that? They worked on something and they looked at food insecurities as well as housing insecurities. Anything that, if not, I can move on if we don't have any information pertaining to that. As Tiffany said earlier, we'll share information with you to the panel, to the attendees a little later. One of our coordinators will get information out to you. Melissa, you were sharing something, or did it already get answered as far as that piece that Abby had mentioned, the hub?
I think it was already answered regarding the hub, but one other resource that's really close to Millersville's campus is the Loft in Millersville. And that is a food and clothing bank that has regular Wednesday night meal distributions, and then has clothing and then special pickups as well. And that's at a church that is pretty much on college campus as well. And so that's been something that's been a huge community support for the local community, and that reaches out for college students as well. The thing that I always have a hard time with is what you said, Abby, is that we have these things, but sometimes you still hear students that don't know about these things or families that don't know about them. So it's just figuring out how to get the word out and how to get people who need these things to access them so they're not hungry or without something warm to wear.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And so there are resources in the community and they are available to students. We may have to, from what was shared by the panelists, make sure that it is widespread marketing of some of the resources that we are aware of. And when we find out other resources available in the community, also try to make sure that we publicize that information as much as we are able to do so as well. Um, and I guess that we are going to ask in dealing with the community resources and looking at how has recruitment been enhanced at your institution for students of color and students from low-income areas? It could be high school or college as far as how you address that.
I think, with admissions, I think, with with things that have happened, I think it has definitely provided us the opportunity to be more innovative. And so providing, virtual admission opportunities for students who not always have the transportation to come to campus has been a plus for the institution, at least Millersville University. I think being able to do that has, sort of hopefully increased some access. I'm going to speak for myself. I know one of the things that is always, sort of a deterrent or discouragement for a lot of first generation low income urban students is that SAT monster, standardized test. And so the fact that they can now look at schools and not have to worry and stress about taking a standardized test in order to get into an institution of higher education, I think that's a plus. Absolutely. And so, being able to be evaluated by your high school work and participating in an interview that allows you to talk a lot about yourself, and to promote, all of your good qualities is a bonus. I mean, we've had this SAT standardized test conversation for quite some time. And we know that there is a huge disparity when it comes to how, I'm going to say, our students test, students like me, when it comes to standardized tests. And so the fact that you've eliminated one stressor for these students, and also the cost, even though, for some schools we provide some, free testing. I think that's a great thing. I think it gives the student the onus to say, I'm gonna, do well in high school, and I'm gonna get into the institution of my choice. So I think that's been a great opportunity for students and families. It's definitely has eliminated that SAT monster, as I call it, and that standardized test for some students.
Just to make sure that we acknowledge some of our participants. Thank you, Christina and Abby and Melissa. Just to acknowledge, one of the comments that Melissa had made earlier was about hand holding. And one of our participants indicated they think that that is very good because that for some, it can make all the difference staying or quitting college if they feel that there is someone that they are able to connect to. So thank you for putting that in. And one of the other questions is that has been placed in there is, has the BLM, which is Black Lives Matter movement, impacted student programming or initiatives at MU Lancaster County in terms of student access and success that you are aware of?
I could start with that. Um, I'm
Please.
working closely, and I know Jeff, who asked that question, also has had some interaction with the school district of Lancaster, and they are in their maybe third year of an equity initiative where they are having their um, building level folks trained in equity practices. And I mean, they are really working hard to provide all of their staff with the training necessary to have equity as far as looking at data, looking at their discipline, because, when students get in that school to prison pipeline, they're less likely to make it to college, as one example. And so they're looking at data in the district to make sure that they are having equitable practices across all parts of their programming. In addition to that, I know that we at Millersville are looking to reach down into the school, and we work with some of the programs that I think maybe Christina, you mentioned earlier, or maybe it was Abby, the Gear Up and some of these other programs. And we have students of color. We have a program called The Color of Teaching, and Dr. Miriam Whitmer has been working with that program for many years, and it takes college students of color, and we reach into the high schools and sort of mentor and then hope that those students will come to Millersville, and we'd love them to be teachers also. So there are ways in which we are trying to do that, and the Black Lives Matter movement has really just pushed that even more into the forefront and made it even more urgent, especially in that community.
Thank you, Tiffany. Abby, Christina, or Melissa?
I mean, I don't want to claim a causal relationship, but I definitely think that the Black Lives Matter movement has amplified things and sped things up a little bit. I can say that what our admissions office is doing now is more than what we were doing when I started a year ago. So they have recently approved a new hire that's going to be happening for an assistant director of intercultural recruitment. They're working on a multicultural outreach and recruitment plan that launched in September. And they're doing a program where they bus in certain school districts that are like low socioeconomic status school districts. They're calling it now the VIP program. It used to be called something else, but they bring the students out for a day and treat them as if they were students. Now, COVID kind of put a damper on that this year. I think it was all online, so it wasn't as well attended, but they've had really good success with getting students to enroll, students of color, marginalized students to enroll. Christina has experience with that too, I think.
Yes, Christina worked in that program. Christina, could you share just a little bit about that? I'm going to move up. I'm going to first, though, respond to the BLM. Abby mentioned it earlier in her response of some of the services on campus, but just to share with you that Campus Life, the Center for Health Education and Promotion, as well as the Intercultural Center, the Rita Wydell, Dr. Rita Wydell Intercultural Center provides programming that addresses Black Lives Matter issues, as well as other specific ethnicities where they will help celebrate their month that has been designated out of the 12 to emphasize a need, also priorities, as well as making sure that their voices are heard. So there has been a number of activities, programs, and events that have been sponsored on the campus to emphasize and to support students that feel that they need to have their voices heard and to express. So not just they, that others in the community can hear their thoughts and how they feel about certain issues that have occurred around the community as well as in the world. Christina, you wanted to share any more about, to respond? Okay, thank you. All right. What are the persistence and graduation rates of your institutions of African American, Latinx, multiracial, and economic disadvantage in comparison to majority students? Melissa, and then you wanted to share graduation rates. You're on mute. We would love to hear your voice.
I'll tell you what, there always has to be one of us.
No, there's several of us that have been in that one.
So yeah, I don't have the actual numbers for our students of color who and their rate of graduation, but I will have that within the next couple of days because that's something I'm very interested in hearing about. So I'm working on getting that. Persistence, I think some of the things that we're doing, just a little bit from your last question, is I think that the Black Lives Matter movement, for one, has made us just keep knowing that this is at the forefront. I think Black Lives Matters has made sure that nobody is able to get away with not following equitable practices and growing in that area. Some of the things specifically that we're doing at Penn Manor are continuing to make a point to push our students of color into high rigorous classes such as AP classes and dual enrollment classes. If they can show and feel confident doing that level of work in high school and having that little bit of experience, it's all the more likely they're going to be successful when they leave us and go to the next step. We have FAFSA completion workshops so that we sit down beside them and help them fill out their FAFSA forms. Because again, that's one thing that leads to melt or just something not following through. And if you don't know how to do that, you need someone to walk you through that. One thing that's also been helped is universities like Millersville have been very generous in waiving application fees. So these are things that we're doing regularly to help our students persist through high school and that transition time into college. And also there's specific things that we've been doing for students of color to try to make sure that there's a level playing field and they have the opportunity to move on and be successful and not fall by the wayside because of some of those barriers.
Thank you so much. One of our panelists did share the information that definitely needs to go out. When our new president, was selected and hired here at Millersville, he reinstituted the importance of having someone at the cabinet level that looked at diversity, equity, and inclusion over the entire university. So our president, Dr. Wuba, placed on the cabinet level a position as far as the chief diversity officer that has been here for, I think, 2 years now. And office is in the Washington House, right there on campus, right across, again, from that building that's right behind me, the SMAC. And also, there are many other offices that support ensuring that our students' voices are heard. And those offices, from one that Christina works in, the SAS, Student Access and Support Services, as well as our education department, as well as social work, and some of our other departments that have active outreach into the community to provide support across the community at all levels. All right. So do we have anyone else would like to respond? Okay. That there is work that needs to be done with that, and that, that the students, Christina is getting ready to, so they are addressing that across the board as far as the averages, and that's what the No Gap Committee, as well as other committees on campus, are addressing, as far as just the data that is probably very typical of a lot of our institutions of higher education. And so that is why, even in this discussion, that it is so critical for not just discussions to happen, but for action to be taken as it is being presented here by some of our departments, as well as overall by our faculty. That's why the need for this workshop or seminar was provided, so that folks can hear what are some of the ways that these areas are being addressed, because it is a issue, as we said, through a lot of institutions, but nationally, as far as ensuring that we look at student success and retention across the board, and focusing on various populations. And that's why we said all students can benefit from what we indicated is shared or was shared here, but also in making sure that we target, as well as or offer to diverse populations within our community and higher education, as well as some of the things that Melissa mentioned are being done, and Christina, in our high schools and even middle schools, that we need to reach down and look at what are the success rates of our students. One of the questions that have come up too is addressing mental health, and the pieces have, the mental health issues that have raised up. And have you seen disparities as far as health, education, and looking at overall, even with housing in our community area, as far as disparities and equity? Tiffany, or?
Well, I mean, absolutely. I think one thing that the government did do that was good was make it so that folks couldn't be evicted for quite some time. But I think a lot of those federal mandates are being dropped at this point, and I do feel very concerned about families and our potential college students who may lose their housing. So surely that's a concern right now.
I think mental health, to follow up on your question, Renardo, has been at the forefront of a lot of conversations, especially, for our students, our urban students, our low income students, when, you know, we're in a pandemic that has impacted these communities more than any other communities. And so you could imagine, we all have been immersed into this new way of life, this new way of work, but it's being triple the impact in these communities. And so mental health has been sort of at the forefront of a lot of the issues that our students are facing because their livelihood has been impacted, and so, we already have had previously pre-COVID issues with our students seeking help for counseling services, or just finding a relatable person to speak to about some of their issues. And so, mental health is at the forefront. So how do we serve students who are impacted by this, and we serve them well? And how do we have counseling services and environment that has relatable individuals that can meet with these students? We have reached this virtual platform, and I think we've done a great job at trying to sort of, find ways to do our work better. But, I always challenge, mental health professionals, and I will continue to challenge them because that's my job. Is that, although we are meeting students virtually, some of our students' environments aren't conducive for learning virtually, and some of their environments are not conducive to have a counseling session virtually. There's taboo and some stigmas that comes with seeking help and counseling for some of these environments. And now you're asking them to do it where individuals can hear, sort of what they're talking about, where there's no privacy. And so, we need to do better. And so, yes, we have found better ways to do our work, but sometimes these ways are not the best way to serve students. And so mental health is going to continue to be a number one issue for us in serving our students. And so we have to find ways to do this better. And so, yeah, we've advanced, and we've, sort of brought our work virtually, but it's not always the best way to do our work. And so we need to acknowledge that.
I think that's a
Thank you.
great point.
Go
Can I
ahead,
jump
Tiffany.
in?
Mhm.
It's interesting because as faculty members, we also have to be alert to some of these nuances that's harder to capture when we're on this electronic platform when we have synchronous sessions with students. So there was a question that's kind of related, a couple actually, in the question and answer. And one is like related to what do we do for faculty who, how do we guide faculty who mandate that we have cameras on? Sometimes a student's environment is not okay for that. Simultaneously, if they're not having their camera on, that could also be an opportunity for that faculty member to say to the student, hey, I noticed you were absent, your face was absent today from class. Are you okay? Can I help you with something? I noticed you're not turning in assignments. Are you okay? Can I help you with something? How can, and I've had more students over the past year talk to me about depression and anxiety impacting their ability to succeed at college. And these are, and like you said, Christina, these mental health concerns are even more magnified when students have challenges, maybe that they don't feel safe at college because of a different race or because they're LGBTQ or whatever it is, or they don't have the food they need, or they don't have housing they need. I mean, everything is exacerbated. So the mental health is so vital, and paying attention. We have to pay attention.
Thank you. Just to close us out, if there are comments of what we are able to offer and what are we able to provide our attendees, our participants, as far as information of what we are doing now, i.e., either in the community or on campus. We heard from Christina and Tiffany that shared some things that we need to be aware, more astute to some of the needs that students are demonstrating or showing, or by their inaction, may be sending out another signal to us for us to then inquire or to talk. We always talk about where individuals are able to be inquisitive and to ask the questions, and so, what are some things that you would just suggest or share with our attendees, our participants, as far as the things that we can do or the things that we are doing? Melissa? Melissa. Go ahead, please.
So I feel like I've heard a number of things that are currently happening at Millersville with the SAS office, with the reach out to the community schools to do some mentoring with the color of teaching. There are a number of examples that were provided. It just seems like there's always room for more. It seems like some of those additional individual, I think I saw, was it Christina that posted having a caseworker or financial worker to help students in their office, because there's some of the things that really help. I get on my soapbox, I'll say it, it's all about one-on-one connection. Having a caring adult or a caring person work through a situation with a student, whether they're a young adult at my level in the high school or at college, it's what it's very rare for a student to be able to do it all on their own without having that connection. And so if they don't come to us with that person, if we want that persistence rate to go up and we want to put out people who are ready to take on the world, we need to help provide that. And that's a lot of person power, but I think that's what we need.
Okay. Abby?
I was just gonna say, right on, like sometimes it just takes one person to, to provide that mentorship, to let someone know that they matter.
Yeah.
And two of the things that our panelists said for all of us to kind of tie into is that the assumption sometimes erroneously is that everyone that is in leadership are always aware of what and how to do certain things. So sometimes training or sensitivity to providing assistance on how to best ask a question that may be perceived as very personal and very sensitive to the individual that is receiving the question. So sometimes we have to be cognizant of that everyone is not prepared or not equipped to be able to answer and ask. But then that's where Melissa said earlier that she is not always aware of how to do certain things. And what did she say? Ask a colleague. So next door, she may ask a colleague of hers, or she may ask someone else, how have you handled this? We've got to be willing to talk to others if we are not the best resource, to find the best resource so that we can help ourselves, but also be able to help the student that is sitting or standing, before us, so that we can serve as a greater resource for them, for access for them to be able to move on through high school to college, or access as far as education. So in general, so we have to be, I guess, as astute enough to assess where the students are, or then to see if we are able to assist, but if not, to feel comfortable in ourselves in saying, maybe there is someone else that might be able to help you. Let me refer you to, or let me walk you over to someone that may be able to assist you. Because sometimes when you say to someone, let me give you a name, they may never follow up with that name. So sometimes you have to be, as again, one of our panelists said, it may be perceived sometimes as hand holding, but it may very well be what that person needed, or that particular culture may be apprehensive about reaching out to others that they are not aware of. So take that extra step and being able to assist them, serve as that vehicle to guide them through sometimes the bureaucracy that they may face, whether it's a high school or whether it's a college or whether it's even at a job. Don't assume just because you are comfortable that they should be as well. So you may have to serve as that point person for them. So we are excited that we've had this opportunity. As mentioned, there are other things that we have here. We have early alert system where individual faculty and staff are able to refer students that may be experiencing difficulty right from the very beginning. as indicated by our panelists, that may not have been there in class, or may not have turned in some work, or may not have performed as well as the faculty member may think that they are capable of. There's an early alert program where faculty can place that in the system for that student to possibly get additional attention, or to be able to be referred to our learning services or our academic advising, area to speak to someone to assist them, and our tutorial system or center. So there are many resources that then are activated once someone makes note through our systems that are in place. And those systems are there and designed to be able to provide the assistance that students may need. Some of our programs, as indicated, the SAS program, CAMP, provide that connection where then students are able to receive either the help directly from those offices, or they're able to refer them to more appropriate sources on campus or even off campus for sources for students and others to be able to access. So we have talked about today access to higher education. We have had panelists, and we thank you definitely for your participation. And as indicated, there are some responses that will be sent to you, followed up, because we did have a response that pertained to the services provided by the hub, that the food app is not necessarily the one that was being thought about and worked on through a couple of offices, but they did reach out to develop a clothes closet for students in need, for interviews, and students that are going for graduate school applications, or folks that are definitely in the community looking for a particular position, and they may need some attire for them to be dressed appropriately for that interview. The clothes closet, social work have developed it, but they have housed it in the hub, and it is for any university student or person in need to be able to look at that facility. And it is open usually 9 to 9 as far as the hub facility. Are there any other questions or any thing that some of our panelists have mentioned? We have the Compassion Fund. I'm trying, but folks keep providing more information because they're excited, and as we said, very passionate about providing service and resources. But we have the Compassion Fund as well, that was initiated early in the year, last year, when students started expressing their need through COVID, not having a job, not being able to pay rent, not being able to get food. And so we have the Compassion Fund that we operate between the Advancement Office and Student Affairs and Enrollment Management, where students are able to put in applications to receive funds to help them with rent and with, i.e., food during the time of this COVID. So it continues on as far as the resources that we have available.
Great. Well, thank you to all the panelists. Thank you, Bernardo, as well, for this wonderful conversation. I sent a link in the chat for people to just quickly fill out a survey. And then I will also send out an email with resources that were mentioned today. But again, thank you for this great conversation. And I'm just thankful that we have all of you in place to be the solution to some of the challenges that our students are facing. So thank you to all.
And Shana, if you just wanted to sum up that we have other Learning Institute workshops coming up.
Yes, we always have more Learning Institute workshops and events coming up. That will be coming in the email as well. I will not forget to put that in there. But I appreciate the plug. Just take care, everyone. Thank you again.
Thank you, panelists.